The UFO cover-up is getting destroyed before our very eyes, and this process is providing me endless pleasure. An entire documentary could be made on how the House of Cards started to wobble when Luis Elizondo stated on October 11th, 2017, the following.
For nearly the last decade, I ran a sensitive aerospace threat identification program focusing on unidentified aerial technologies. It was in this position I learned that the phenomena is indeed real.
I'm obviously not going to give you every single incident constituting the House of Cards receiving breezes at its structure, but I will give you some key points that have perhaps gotten forgotten within the whirlwind experience we're all going through called the disclosure process. In 2018, Dr. Hal Puthoff stated that this was the first time he was able to talk about his experience working for a government-funded UFO study program.
The third area, unidentified aerial phenomena, I have not published anything in. Why? Because the program I was involved in the Pentagon and in the intelligence community, has been top secret, behind the scenes, and only recently has there been release of information about the program. And so this is the first chance that I've had a chance to actually appear before the public and speak about details of the program and not go to jail.
On March 25th, 2019, Luis Elizondo explained that he received a call from a colleague explaining how things have dramatically changed when it comes to discussing ATIP on an open basis.
But I received a call from him very, very recently, actually it was this week, and he said, you know, Lou, it's funny because a conversation that I had to have with you just a year and a half ago in a vault within a skiff in a TSSCI facility that SAP cleared, and we had to whisper to have this conversation. I can now have this conversation in the open halls of the Pentagon. Imagine that. How far we've come.
So while ATIP may never have been classified, it's clear from what Dr. Hal Puthoff and Luis Elizondo have stated that they were still not permitted to openly talk about ATIP and what it was doing on behalf of the US government. The House of Cards are indeed falling, baby. My video titled UFO Crash Retrieval Article About to Drop in New York Times literally published around 5 hours before the New York Times article on crash retrievals published. Not bad for you, boy. And this article sets off a wave of media coverage. Here's a mind-blowing segment with Tucker Carlson and Commander David Fravor.
Tell us if you think this is being misinterpreted. According to the New York Times, the U.S. government has physical evidence of some sort of vehicle made not on this earth. Is it what it sounds like?
Well, it sounds that way to me, Tucker. I just, I never want to speculate what the government truly has, but I would say there's stuff out there. I mean, the four of us that chased the Tic Tac in 2004 have attested to it multiple times that what we saw exceeded anything that we had in our inventory, far superior to the airplanes that we were flying in at the time they were brand new. So I would say, yes, there's something out there, and hopefully the government does have stuff.
This segment went from talking about the U.S. government having retrieved an alien vehicle to a former Top Gun aviator asserting that what he encountered in 2004 simply did not exist within the U.S. military inventory because of its staggering capabilities. Fravor goes on to explain that him and the U.S. government have concluded that the machine he encountered also does not originate from any foreign military inventory either. Here is another mind-blowing clip from the same interview.
Since 2017, the world is starting to change because of the publicity, because of the attention of the Senate and the Congress, because of people like Marco Rubio on the Intel Committee of telling the DOD, hey, I want to report. I think you're starting to see more and more of that. And I would say if the government does have stuff, and I don't know what they have, but if they do, I would think that, there's probably stuff. If you go, Roswell was 73 years ago. If something did happen, because there's a lot of speculation that there was something other than a weather balloon, where's all that at?
Yeah.
I mean, if just by odds, something would be here.
So that raises the question of why all the secrecy? I mean, clearly the U.S. government has lied to the public for maybe 73 years. Why do you think?
If we go back to like Project Blue Book and go, it was done, it really did two things. One, it investigated occurrences and sightings that people saw. The other one was it primarily was sent out to debunk, to prove that it wasn't, or to make excuses of why it wasn't. I don't know why. I think some of it was trying to capture that technology. But if something lands in your front yard, there's no reason to deny that it existed, or,
right.
Or for the government to cover it up. Because, if it's not collected by some means that's going to question our national security or our offensive or defensive capabilities, then why would you hide it? That just baffles me. Just like our incident, why wasn't it thoroughly investigated at the time for something that literally could penetrate a battle group spaces, and they did nothing? I mean, there was nothing done until really about 2009.
Fravor went from talking about the UFO Senate intelligence bill, Roswell, Project Blue Book, and finally the absurdity of the UFO cover-up. This was all stated on a nationally syndicated television show. If that doesn't blow your mind, then perhaps nothing in our universe will. Now, don't get it twisted. It's not just Fox News that has covered this New York Times article that literally talks about UFO crash retrievals. Other television outfits, as well as The Hill, have also been covering it. And it's been spreading like fire in online publications, including Popular Mechanics, with this title. Pentagon has off-world vehicles not made on this earth. Bombshell. The government's once clandestine UFO program will reveal findings on unexplained materials and crashes. Even Joe Rogan has gotten into the melee. Buckle up, kids. Second half of 2020 coming in hot. When the Pentagon says it has the recent recovery of off-world vehicles not made on this earth, stuff is about to get really weird. This is my 9th video in the month of July, so if you were ever considering becoming a patron or getting a YouTube membership for my channel, now would probably be a good time. But enough about that, let's continue. Now let's dive into the bombshell New York Times article and give it an analysis. The Pentagon program's previous director, Luis Elizondo, a former military intelligence official who resigned in October 2017 after 10 years with the program, confirmed that the new task force evolved from the Advanced Aerospace Program. It no longer has to hide in the shadows, Mr. Elizondo said. It will have a new transparency. It will have a new transparency, Elizondo says. Now, recall where I showed you 2 clips. One with Hal Puthoff from 2018, where he said, this is the first time I can talk about my involvement working on behalf of the U.S. government as it relates to UFOs. And then another with Elizondo from 2019, where he says, a colleague got in contact with him and said, hey, remember when we were in the Pentagon and we had to go into a vault and then into a skiff and we had to whisper just to talk about Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program? And now people can talk about that operation within the halls of the Pentagon? Not only is this whole thing breaking out into the mainstream, but we're entering greater transparency as well. This is only the beginning. The whole infrastructure of the United States of America, where billions of dollars most likely get funneled so that secret, tiny little compartmentalized special access programs can study something that absolutely exists in our environment and is not of human origin, that is coming to the fore because we are entering a new world. Mr. Elizondo is among a small group of former government officials and scientists with security clearances who, without presenting physical proof, say they are convinced that objects of undetermined origin have crashed on Earth with materials retrieved for study. This article has further established the reality that ATIP continues, and it's now called UAP Task Force. It further establishes that, yes, Elizondo not only worked for ATIP for a long time, but he was the director of ATIP for the better part of 10 years. But it does not, by any stretch of the imagination, prove that the U.S. government has retrieved an alien vehicle. However, and this is a big however, I think there's a lesson here. Elizondo was telling the truth the whole darn time, and we doubted him, didn't we? Well, I didn't doubt him, but a lot of people did. Just as many witnesses of UFOs are constantly doubted. Just as David Fravor and the 3 other aviators that encountered a mysterious machine on November of 2004 are doubted. I mean, we got guys like Mick West saying, oh, first they saw a seagull, then they saw reflections in the windshield, and it all was like this big comedy of errors that just coalesced with each other, and it all happened at the same time. I mean, it is so absurd that it's just without comprehension. The bottom line is, not everyone is lying. All those government documents that you can do your own research on that talk about nuclear installations getting visited by mysterious machines of unknown origin, all those documents, government documents talking about the reality of this phenomena, are you just going to sit there and really say it's all BS? Everyone's lying, everyone's mistaken? Don't be a stupido. Mr. Reid, the former Democratic senator from Nevada who pushed for funding the earlier UFO program when he was the majority leader, said he believed that crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred and that retrieved materials should be studied. After looking into this, I came to the conclusion that there were reports, some were substantive, some not so substantive, that there were actual materials that the government and the private sector had in their possession, Mr. Reid said in an interview. No crash artifacts have been publicly produced for independent verification. Some retrieved objects, such as unusual metallic fragments, were later identified from laboratory studies as man-made. After the article published, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid took issue with a paraphrase of his in the article, where it stated he believed objects of unknown origin have crashed. He had the New York Times change that to may have crashed. People on Twitter were making a big deal out of it, but I don't think it really was that big of a deal. And here's a tweet by Harry Reid further underscoring his position in this arena. Reid states, I have no knowledge and I have never suggested the federal government or any entity has unidentified flying objects or debris from other worlds. I have consistently said we must stick to science, not fairy tales about little green men. The constraints on discussing classified programs and the ambiguity of information cited in unclassified slides from the briefings have put officials who have studied UFOs in the position of stating their views without presenting any hard evidence. Mr. Davis, who now works for Aerospace Corporation, a defense contractor, said he gave a classified briefing to a Defense Department agency as recently as March about retrievals from off-world vehicles not made on this earth. Mr. Davis said he also gave classified briefings on retrievals of unexplained objects to staff members of the Senate Armed Services Committee on October 21st, 2019, and to staff members of the Senate Intelligence Committee 2 days later. All I'm really going to say is that if there are government officials being briefed on quote-unquote off-world vehicles not made on this earth, then I'm just going to quote my boy Kakala Diallo. We eatin' good. I mean, we eatin' good. Here's an absolutely fascinating sentiment from Danny Silva of silvarecord.com. I have never heard this before, and it was on Grant Cameron's panel yesterday. Let's dive in.
The UAPTF, the UAP Task Force, they are, I don't want to say war, but I have been actually. They're basically at war with some of these semi-illegal or illegal programs. I think that's been the plan for a long time. Get these programs to cough up what they have, give them to UAPTF, UAPTF is the continuation of ATIP, by the way. It definitely is. It's ran out of OUSDI with most of the heavy lifting done by the Navy. They are the continuation of ATIP, and they want what all these secret programs have. The thing is, a lot of these other people are read into these programs, the secret ones. They just don't have access to get what they have. So they want access to that stuff. No more is it okay where these secret programs can keep everything squirreled away somewhere. That's not okay anymore. It's 2020, and we need to have all that stuff in the hands of the politicians, in the hands of UAPTF, and that's part of why this whole bill is coming about. So it's really important movement behind the scenes. There's politicians like Marco Rubio, Warner, all these people that have been briefed, and they're banging their fist on the desk now saying, we got to get this stuff out because we want to see it. And it's not okay for it to be locked up. So I think that's a really, really important point. I think that's what's going to keep happening. UAPTF has more power than ATIP did, the Lou Elizondo version of ATIP. Not only that, but the leader of UAPTF is higher up now than Lou Elizondo was. So everything's been working that they've been trying to do.
They have 2 stars.
Yeah, so it's great progress. And what we're seeing now with the bill, with more stories, it's more pressure on the neck of these secret programs. And I wouldn't be sleeping too well if I was working for one of those programs. They either need to cough it up or, Lou Elizondo hinted on Coast to Coast, they may end up going to jail. So we're going to see what happens with them, but they need to change how they're operating.
I want you to listen to this part again.
I wouldn't be sleeping too well if I was working for one of those programs.
I know for a fact that Danny Silva has exceptional sources. So if it was me, I would take what he just said with more than a grain of salt. Perhaps it's all going to get real interesting as we progress further into our destiny, which is a post-disclosure world. Now, we all know that Harry Reid tried to get ATIP, which is now known as UAP Task Force, Special Access Program status. And one of the reasons Harry Reid wanted to do that was so that he would have more access to UFO data. I mean, think about it. Do you think this organization wants to reinvent the wheel? They're trying to study UFOs on behalf of the United States government. Reinventing the wheel is a total waste of time. If they could get more access to some of the silos that cover UFO studies, then their endeavor would be a lot more successful. So hopefully UAP Task Force will start getting access to the data that these other UFO programs have. Here's a fascinating clip also from Grant Cameron's panel yesterday with Joseph Buckman. He basically is going to tell you that he approached Hal Puthoff and asked him why the people behind the UFO programs feel it's so necessary to keep this reality a secret.
And then I caught him in private. And I said, Dr. Puthoff, I've had a lifelong interest in this. And I can't understand why it's such a huge secret without revealing anything you may know about that. Can you tell me, if I were to be fully read into the program and somebody were to share with me the reasons it's been kept so secret, would I be very likely to agree with them? I mean, is there a really good reason for keeping this secret that if I were fully in that world, I would appreciate and join in keeping it secret? I asked something like that. I don't remember my question exactly, but I remember his response very clearly. He took a step back, he looked at the floor, he looked up and he said, well, Joe, I don't think the reasons are as valid as the gatekeepers think they are. And I called Bassett. I don't know if Steve remembers. I called you from the hallway 5 minutes later. And Steve said, go back in and ask him who the gatekeepers are.
I don't know what the reasons of the gatekeepers are. You'd have to ask them to know. But if I was to place a bet, it would be that they're not nearly as valid as the gatekeepers think they are. And I would say that it seems to me that it's probably likely that the fear of repercussions factors in to their incredible enthusiasm about keeping UFO secret even up to this current day. This video is getting lengthy, so I'm going to finish it off with a question from George Knapp to Luis Elizondo from a Coast to Coast AM episode, July 19th, 2020. George Knapp asks, does the possibility occur to you that maybe this problem is unsolvable even after all the stovepipes are torn down, after all the information is collected? You put it all together and it's still unidentified? You still don't know where it came from, who's flying them, what their intentions are. Luis Elizondo responds, that is certainly a possibility, and it's an uncomfortable thing to think about, George, but I tend to be a little bit more optimistic. I have a little bit more faith in mankind. I think if we apply our resources and our talent appropriately, there's very little we can't accomplish. We can put a person on the moon in 10 years at a time where our technology was, we're just coming into the jet age, and 10 years later, we're putting people on the moon. So I give a little bit more credit to humanity. I think we should have the conversation and we should continue to pursue the data and let the data speak for itself. And finally let America make up its own mind. We should not be determining what America should or should not know. That's up for Americans to decide, not governments. Please don't forget to subscribe.